to another episode of Sit and Spin with me, your host, Joe Royland. I know I had another absence last week, but as I was saying in the prior episode, there just hasn't been a lot out lately that I've been super crazy about and wanted to review. And then I remembered, oh yes, I haven't gotten around to talking about the latest album from Band of Skulls and their new album, By Default. We last caught up with the trio from Southampton, England, back in episode 45 when we were talking about their third album, Himalayan, which was one of my favorite records of 2014. And when I first saw this album, I was initially thinking, already? They've already got a new album out? And then I actually realized, yeah, it's been 2 years since the trio of Russell Marsden on guitar and vocals, and Emma Richardson on bass and vocals, and Matt Hayward on drums put out a record. And that record was a real high watermark for the band, and for me personally, I thought it was like the best thing they'd ever done. So right away, even before I heard this album, it was going to be a hard act to follow that album. But By Default definitely shows the band still has the goods. It's their first album on the BMG label group. Their previous stuff had been issued independently. And it was produced and engineered by the legendary Gil Norton, who's well known for his work with groups like the Pixies, the Foo Fighters, Feeder, James, Echo and the Bunnymen, and a further long list. It would take me all night to go through all the many great artists he's worked with. So right away, even before you hear anything on this album, you pretty much know that sonically the band are going to be in really good hands. Now, if you know nothing of the band, you never saw that first episode we did on them, go back and watch it again, episode 45. The group's sound is similar in style to bands like the Black Keys and the White Stripes, or bands with a kind of a "the" preceding their name, or even maybe the Joy Formidable, in that it's kind of a blues-based, heavy retro rock sounding at its base, but Band of Skulls also throw in a lot of other cool stylistic accents to color their tunes, and considering the fact that they're a trio, you kind of have to do that to kind of fill out the sound since there's only 3 people, but boy, they more than adequately cover those bases. Now, one of the aspects about this band that I've always really liked is that for most of their songs, the vocals are a harmonic blending of Russell and Emma singing together, and usually led by one of the two of them in the main part of the vocal. For this album, Russell predominantly takes the leads on almost all of the songs, with Emma only take the main vocal on one track, which is the song So Good. It's kind of a real slinky, disco-ish feel to it. I think almost kind of an INXS vibe to it. But even though she's not doing as many lead vocals on this album, her bass work throughout this album is just stellar. Whether it's a tricked out funky groove on the album highlight you're hearing right now, Killer, or even the bossa nova style backing of the song Tropical Disease, which also is another favorite of mine off this album. That tune also features some really cool guitar solo effects from Russell, and Russell also throughout the album is just a great guitar player as well as being a great singer. But aside from Emma's bass work and Russell's guitar work and the duo's vocal work, let's also not forget about drummer Matt Hayward, who's just a rock solid steady drummer who knows exactly when to hit hard on the beat and when to lay off of it, but just a great drummer who drives the sound of this band. And aside from the previously mentioned tunes, there's plenty else to like on this record. If you like these straight up rockers, you've got the album opener Black Magic, or Back of the Beyond, or even the stomping This Is My Fix. Those tracks will do you right. And many of the songs on this record also feature a Pixies-like loud, quiet, loud style, with the band shifting gears in between similar, sparser passages and full-on rock, just even in the same song. And tracks like Bodies, which is the tune you're hearing right now, Little Mama and Embers all kind of highlight that style. And there's also some serious swing and sway groove going on behind many of the songs as well. The album's somewhat title track, which is the song In Love by Default, which is the closest ballad you're going to get on this record, shows this, as does the track which follows, the Beauty Rounds, which has a bit of the Chameleon Swamp thing going on in its grooves, which is totally cool because I love that tune. And the album also closes out on a light, almost Prince-like funk of the song Something, which the late artist likely would have been very proud to have done himself. I think if he heard it, he probably would have wanted to cover it. That's how cool it is. And that tune's probably the second closest thing you'll get to an album, a ballad on this album. But overall, By Default, another great release from a band that should get way more credit than they're due. They should get a lot more attention than they're getting. I really thought Himalayan would have broken them big. Unfortunately, that wasn't the beat, but you never know. Maybe By Default will be the album that finally breaks them big. But there's just so much to love about this band. Just great hooks, killer harmonies, just all around great tunes. Just like good rock. You can't do worse than By Default. from Band of Skulls. And that's the show for this week. Hopefully I'll have something groovy and new for you next week. I know once we get into October, I'm going to be overloaded with great albums I want to talk about if you've been watching the page at all. So thanks for tuning in. We will catch you next time on Sit and Spin, and we'll see you then.